And I'm in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm in Washington, D.C. as well. So, yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. We'll give folks a moment to enter the space and then we'll get started.
It's been really fun. We've been getting a lot of emails from kids lately, which has been really, and parents, but a lot from kids. And I got to talk to some aspiring scientists the other day. They were very, it's one of those things. It's like when you talk to an 11-year-old, they know way more about paleontology or biology or astronomy than you do. So I'm like, are you interested? Do you know what a plesiosaur is? And she was like, yeah, of course I know what a plesiosaur is. She's like 9 years old. So that was great.
Yeah. One of my friend's kids, like woke her up in the middle of the night and was like, Mom, she's like, is everything okay? She's like, Mom, I want to be a bioengineer. And my friend's like, I don't even know what a bioengineer is, but you read about it in your book. So apparently it's working.
Well, I know we have a few people still coming in, but I see we've got a nice critical mass. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Chelsea Lake. I'm a member of the events team at Politics and Prose Bookstore, and I'd like to welcome you to PNP Live. Before we officially get started, a few housekeeping notes. At any point during the event, you can click on the link that I'll be dropping in the chat to purchase No Boundaries, 25 Women Explorers and Scientists Share Adventures, Inspiration, and Advice. You can ask a question by clicking on the Q&A. That feature can be found along the bottom of your screen. We'll try to get to everyone's questions, but I apologize in advance if we don't have time to address yours. We are delighted to offer closed captioning for this event via Zoom's auto captioning service. To access captions, simply click on the live transcripts option, which is also along the bottom of your screen. And now on to the good stuff, our event. Tonight, we'll be discussing No Boundaries, 25 Women Explorers and Scientists Share Adventures, Inspiration, and Advice, a book in which we'll meet 25 women explorers and scientists in inspirational and poignant stories of exploration, courage, and girl power. Along the way, they share lessons learned and words of wisdom sure to inspire the next generation of scientists, adventurers, and world changers. Track a volcanologist as she braves the elements atop an active volcano. Travel alongside a mountaineer as she battles stereotypes and frostbite to conquer the famed 7 summits. Join a conservationist on her passionate fight to save lions. Dig with a paleontologist to uncover massive dinosaur fossils, bit by breathtaking bit. These heartfelt stories give readers an insider's look at the amazing work female explorers at National Geographic and beyond are doing in the field to solve some of the world's toughest problems. No Boundaries sends a positive message to every girl who has ever dreamed or dared to go a little further. Although these explorers' endeavors are quite adventurous, the lessons they share can inspire all girls, as well as boys, whatever their goals, skills, and interests. Now, let's meet our panel. Claire Fiesler, PhD, is a National Geographic explorer, photojournalist, and conservation biologist. She has conducted field research on coral reefs and island ecology across the Caribbean and wider Atlantic Ocean. She's currently a fellow at the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History, developing new ways to understand and protect marine mammal populations in the Arabian Gulf and beyond. Gabby Salazar is a National Geographic explorer, a nature and conservation photographer, and a social scientist. As Associate Fellow of the International League of Conservation Photographers, she has worked on environmental photography projects across the globe, spending months at a time living in tropical rainforests and on tropical islands. Dr. Munaza Alam is an astronomer, National Geographic Young Explorer, and postdoctoral researcher at the Carnegie Earth and Planets Laboratory in Washington, D.C. Munaza's research interests include the detection and detailed characterization of the atmosphere of exoplanets, or planets beyond our solar system. Her work involves using data from Hubble Space Telescope to infer the presence of different molecules in their atmosphere. Dr. Morangels Mbiza, I hope I said that right, is a conservation biologist working at the intersection of conservation and community development. She is the founder and executive director of Wildlife Conservation Action, an organization focusing on building the capacity of local communities to protect and coexist with wildlife while improving their livelihoods. Her work on lions was in 2018 featured in a National Geographic short film, One Woman's Remarkable Journey to Protect Lions. And finally, Dr. M. Jackson, who is scheduled to be here, is unable to participate this evening. Her presence will be missed tonight, but attendees can still find her work in No Boundaries. So without further ado, I pass the screen on to our distinguished panel. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. We're so excited to be here, and we're coming in from all around, the globe. Morangels is joining us you're in Zimbabwe right now, and it's, what time is it?
It's around 1 a.m.
So we're very grateful to have you with us. And I think Claire and I are both really excited to be able to share this book, but also to share some time with two of the amazing women in the book. And for us, Claire and I have been friends now for almost 10 years, and which I'm pretty sure, yeah. And
Wow,
yeah, and we've seen each other through. Claire finished her PhD while we've been friends. I'm hopefully going to finish mine later this year, and we've had the chance to meet amazing women, many of whom we've featured in this book. And I think for me, this book has been one of the things that I'm most proud of. That I've been able to work on and produce. And it's because it really, I think, is meant to, one, elevate the stories of amazing early career scientists in particular, but scientists who are working today, but also to help expose kids to possibilities. And I think for me, like when I was a kid growing up in rural North Carolina, I had no idea that you could be a volcanologist or a conservation biologist or look up at the stars and make that into your career like Munaza has. And I think that, Claire and I, in a lot of conversations, and she's going to talk more about the origin story of the book, but really realized this is the kind of book we wanted to have when we were kids. And, I think because we've been able to collaborate on this and help each other through while we've been working on our PhDs, we were able to make something, I think that's really special, and I hope inspires kids to look further. And I think that's something that came up in a lot of the interviews, which, the way that we actually did this book is we did long form interviews with all 25 women and then kind of brought their stories to life from those interviews. And the thing that came up again and again is that just like my experience as a kid, most of these women didn't know that they could do what they ended up, doing professionally when they were kids. It was a lecture or an experience or a visit to a museum, looking up at a blue whale skeleton that kind of made them aware of that possibility and help them dream and then bring those dreams into reality. And so that's really what the book is about. It's like a yearbook in some ways of all of these possible science careers. So Claire, do you want to talk a little bit about our kind of the origin story and how we actually, got this started?
Yeah. So, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the origin story because I really want to get to talking to Morangels and Munasa, who have become friends too. But, I think there's always like a sense from people, and it's a question I get all the time. It's like, where did the idea from the book come from? How does something go from like an idea to like a finished product, which is conveniently right here. And for me, it started with, Gabby Salazar, Gabby, you were here. Gabby and I were among the very first classes of Young Explorers. I think I was the first class of Young Explorers at National Geographic, and Gabby maybe the second or third. And it was essentially a program new at the time. I think it started in 2010 or 11. And it was essentially, instead of funding the Jane Goodalls and the Bob Ballards of the world, Bob Ballard discovered the Titanic, National Geographic Society realized that, there was a need for like a stepping stone from like college and graduate school to becoming these renowned scientists. And so they created this program, the National Geographic Young Explorers program, to, be exactly that. And, small amounts of money, small grants, and, photography and science, conservation. And so all of a sudden, it was, in your 20s, Gabby and I were kind of thrust into this world of very acclaimed, renowned scientists and photographers. And I think it was apparent right off the bat that it was mostly a very white and male dominated field. And it was so stark that I started really kind of talking to people about that and ways that we could kind of promote diversity just within the explorer community, and then kind of science in general. And I don't want to, there's like a longer story here, but essentially Gabby and myself and a couple other young explorers, we spent time going through a bunch of National Geographic magazines to actually count how many times a scientist or explorer was quoted or portrayed. And then we coded them for male or female. And after looking across like 3 years, we saw that, women were represented less than 20% of the time. And so we presented that, that kind of little project at National Geographic at one of these, kind of summits where they convene a lot of the older explorers and young explorers. And Gabby approached me afterwards. She's like, we should do something. We should do a children's, exhibit. We should do a short documentary. We should do a web series. We have all these ideas. And that's really where it came from. And the first thing we did is we actually got money to do a short documentary. And we went into the field with Mirangels, and we spent almost 3 weeks with her in her fieldwork and telling her story, and made a 10-minute short doc that you can now see at National Geographic's YouTube channel. And we won a couple of awards. And, I think we came back to National Geographic and said, we want to make more of these. We want to profile all these different women. The audience for that short documentary, which you should watch, like Mirangel's stories, she'll tell you all about it. She's got a remarkable story. That was for an adult audience. And National Geographic and some editors were interested in kind of taking this idea of showing women struggles and successes and showing them in nuanced ways for a younger audience. And that's kind of how this book was born. And, the last thing I'll say about that idea is, like, going into it, Gabby and I wanted first to make sure that like each of the women that we profiled kind of represented a unique way of like either getting started or overcoming an obstacle. And then another thing is that we just wanted to show the diversity of people and cultures and geographies in science. And so to kind of take a global view of things. And so that's kind of how this book came about. And so, with that in mind, I would really love to spend some time kind of talking about these themes about women in science and ask questions to Mirangels and Munas, and they can tell you their stories. But I'm also going to pose some questions to Gabby because, essentially Gabby and I are the authors, but we are colleagues with Munas and Mirangels. We're all kind of early career explorers and scientists who are facing similar challenges. So it'll be more of a conversation than like an interview, which I think I would enjoy more. And so we'll just get started. My first question, and I'm going to start by asking this to Gabby, is do you have to study science or have to have a degree in science to contribute to science and exploration? Because I think that's a question a lot of people, especially young people, have. Like, do you need to have a biology degree?
Yeah, I think the answer is absolutely not. And we definitely wanted to highlight in the book women who contribute to science and exploration, even without, formal degrees. And so, or formal degrees in science. So we have women who are athletes, like who have athletic abilities, like an expedition leader or a long distance hiker who can raise awareness about conservation and science, right? And we also have photographers and visual artists. And I think we also have a citizen scientist, and that's a big kind of growing field. So Jean Beasley works on sea turtle rehabilitation, and she was a school teacher and then retired and then got involved in science. And so I think there's all these opportunities to be involved in science. And one of the things that Claire and I read a lot about when we were, because we're all scientists, we like looked at the research.
Because we're nerds, we look at the
Yeah.
research.
We read a bunch of peer-reviewed literature on like what influences, young people to go into science. And we found that, one of the issues is that people have a pretty narrow conception or like concept of what a STEM career is. And so we need to expand our idea of what counts as a STEM career. So that's my kind of take, but I'll turn it over to Manaza if you want to comment on that as well.
Yeah, sure. I love your last comment about how we need to expand what it means to have a STEM career. Definitely, I agree that it is not necessary to have a science degree to make contributions to science and to exploration. And citizen science is exactly a perfect example of that. If anyone is interested in contributing to research, there are several citizen science projects that you can get involved in now, if you'd like, that are going to make a difference for research. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a path in which you're pursuing a science degree and a research career and leading world-renowned research. For example, identifying or classifying something, for example, on Galaxy Zoo, which is a citizen scientist project, is one piece of the puzzle, which is really all that research is. And in particular, as an astronomer, I do have to say that this resounds even more so for me, because one of the compelling things about astronomy is that it is human to look up at the night sky and contemplate its wonders. And so there's a place to be inspired by astronomy for all humans. And I think that there is also space for all humans to contribute to astronomy as well.
Great.
And Marangels, what about you? I know that you work with so many people in the field, and you obviously have a PhD, but you work with so many people in the field in Zimbabwe who don't have the same training that you do. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I do agree with everybody. And I think I can just add that with the communities that we are working with, like most of them don't even have like science degrees, or some are not like educated to that level of having a degree, but they are still contributing to conservation. So you don't really need to have a science degree to contribute to science. And even like when you have another career, like artists, visual artists, or other kinds of arts, like you can still contribute to the sciences in various ways. So I do agree that you don't really need to have a science degree to contribute.
Yeah. Marangels, you did get a PhD from Oxford, one of the most renowned universities in the world. What did that degree though offer you specifically, if people do want to do that route, and they can?
Yes, it did. Like I would say like the knowledge that I gained from like the research that I did in Wanga National Park on lions was really instrumental in pushing me forward with my career. And also just the interactions that I got from working with some of the most amazing like conservationists from across the world. That also really inspired me and motivated me in my own career. And I got to spend time with lions during my PhD. So it was really nice to spend some time in the bush. Yeah, and I also got to meet like many people during my time in conferences, in workshops, and that's how I think I met you, Claire, at one of the conferences.
We met at a conference in France. That's right.
Yes. So it really created opportunities for me, and also just having that affirmation and that background can also help me as I move forward. Like because I have like a PhD in conservation, people have more confidence in the work that I do because they know that I have studied that and I'm an expert in that area. So yeah.
That's great. And yeah, I think the nice thing, I think you brought up a theme that I think about a lot now that I'm in the middle of writing my dissertation is the PhD just gives you so much time to think and focus and be creative and like pursue your curiosity. And I think that's like a big privilege of pursuing that type of degree. It is really hard, but it also, you don't get that kind of space at any other point in your life. And you get paid for it if you get a fellowship, which I think a lot of people don't realize, is that a lot of science PhDs do come with a stipend, and it's a job as well. You don't get paid a lot, but you can go to Trader Joe's and it's fine. So, so I have another question for everybody. So one of the things we address in the book are some of the challenges that, are real in pursuing a career in STEM or a career in exploration. And we know that it's not always easy. And so, Claire, I'll start with you. What is a challenge you faced in your career and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so, I think my challenge will be similar to Marangel's, is that you're both mothers. And I also want to make a shout out to M. Jackson, who's supposed to be here on our panel tonight, but she actually just had a little baby boy and is dealing with, kind of some of the, things are fine with them, but it was definitely not an easy birth for her. And, that's taking away from her opportunities to come here. And I think being a mom and having children is, it's the constant, kind of like working mother struggle. And so, this crosscuts other careers. But I will say that, like, I think Miranda will speak to this, her story, and mine is like, if you're a field scientist, if you are traveling to Chile to like your telescopes, if you're in the bush, with lions and armed guards, if you're scuba diving for 5 hours a day, that's really hard to be away from your kid. And often women have to put their careers on pause, or they have to lean on family. That puts a real strain on family relations. And so myself, like, I really kind of took a 2-year step away from research, actually, when I had my kid. And thankfully, I found a route back through a colleague who kind of knew that I wanted to get back into field research and gave me opportunity to, come to the Smithsonian. And so I left my teaching faculty position and now at the Smithsonian doing research full time. But, I think it was a little bit of luck that I got that opportunity. And so I think retention within research and field research is a big problem for people who want families. And so I think what happens is that women end up doing research, which they're confined to the lab or the, campus, and not really being out in the field. And I think we all realize, after having written this book, that, like, there are those discovery eureka moments that happen in the lab, but so much of it actually happens when you're out in the field, when you are in risky or dangerous situations. And we need to make sure that women still have those opportunities to do that. And so we covered, we covered motherhood in a couple different profiles, which I was really, really proud about. I became a mom while we were writing the book, so it was extra important to me. Like, it wasn't as much as my radar. It was because of Marangel's, but it became even more so because I gave birth during the writing of this book. So maybe I'll turn that over to Marangel's. Like, how has being a mom been an extra challenge for you in your work?
Yeah, it's been a huge challenge. Like, when I was doing my PhD, I had to travel a lot. And I spent most of that time away from my son. So it was really a struggle trying to find that balance. And it's not just children only, it's also like relationships. Like, it's so difficult to keep those relationships because you are away most of the time. And sometimes it ends up not working at all. But I think if you have like a good support system around you, if you have a good family and friends that can support you through that, it can really help. And I think the other challenge that I have seen is that sometimes people don't really have confidence in women. And like in field conservation, you would hear someone say like, I can't hire you because you're a woman, you will get married and you will leave and you won't be able to stay in the bush and all those things. So it really ends up pushing women out of field conservation as a career that they can pursue. So those are some of the challenges that I've seen. Yeah.
Munasa, what about you?
So I think exploring science through research is inherently a hard thing to do because it involves asking questions that nobody in the world knows the answer to, and then trying to come up with creative ways to answer those questions. And it doesn't help when there are additional challenges when trying to do this already challenging thing. And for me in particular, I majored in physics when I was in college. And physics is a male-dominated field, and most of my peers were men. I was one of 3 women in my classes, and so that was definitely a challenge just in terms of being taken seriously and just kind of feeling a part of this field, especially feeling like I could even make a contribution to physics, to astronomy. And really the way to overcome this was to look to my amazing, strong female mentors and lean on them to be my support system. And I think mentorship is so important, and I discuss this in the book as well, but I spent my time as a college student and as a PhD student really building up my arsenal of strong female mentors that I could go to and get support from. And that I think has been a gift that keeps on giving. And I look forward to being one of those mentors for more junior women in the future.
Yeah, I love that part of your story, Munasa, and we really wanted to talk about those friendships and mentorship because I think also for young people, at least I don't know if you all felt this way, but I always kind of thought of scientists as being alone, like a lonely scientist in the lab or like a lonely scientist out on top of a mountain. And I think that could maybe be a deterrent for some kids who want to pursue a career in science, and showing that there are these collaborations and there's friendships, and like science is this space where you can build teams that can work together to answer questions, I think is such an important message to get across to kids. And your story really helps exemplify that.
And I think when I met you, Manasa, like you had really made your science story about your friendships with your other female colleagues. Like that is kind of what defined you during presentations and talking about your research. Like you put that front and center, like you made that choice to not just say, hey, I'm a scientist, but like I'm a scientist who does like collaborative work with this specific person, like she's here with me, like we're doing this together. And I just love that. And so like in my mind, when I think of you, I think of that first presentation I saw you give together with your friend in astronomy, now your colleague. And that just like leaves an impression, you know what I mean? So how you present yourself. And so when we wrote about you and when we interviewed you and wrote about you for the profile in the book, like that was front and center for us too. So you'll see that if you get the book and read it. I'm looking at the time. I really want to get on to some of the other questions, but Gabby, did you want to speak to? No? Okay. So I will say that one of the things I love about our book is that we, advice, there's good advice and there's bad advice. And I felt like we wanted to synthesize as much good advice as possible for young girls entering into the field. And so we interviewed these, 25 women, the 2 women you see here and, 23 others. And we asked every single one of them, like, what is your advice to kids? And we got things, we got advice all over, that ran the gamut from like really, really practical of like, you need to apply to a scholarships because like you can have all the inspiration in the world, but if you can't finish paying for college, then that's going to be the biggest hindrance, even if you have unlimited inspiration. To, other, the other gamut is, Asha DeVos talks about you know, making yourself indispensable so that people don't see your gender, but they just see you as a necessity for whatever work is at hand. And so you'll see that like advice has become a big part of this book. For me, the two things, you know, that like this book represents two things. One, persistence. How do women persist despite a lot of obstacles, many of them gender-based obstacles? And the other is like, what advice do you have along the way? And so there's tons of advice in this book, but I want to pose to you guys now, like, what advice do you have for young women who are interested in STEM careers? And I guess we'll start with you, Gabby.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just to follow your curiosity and to let it go where it takes you. I think for a lot of kids, I think, and I myself included, there's a tendency to think that paths are going to be linear. Life is going to be linear. You're going to decide on what you're going to do, and you're going to just take a ton of steps to get there. And I think the nice thing about science is you get to generate your own questions, and you can follow those questions where they lead you. And sometimes they can lead you in totally different directions. And life can also, as we all know, lead you in totally different directions. So for me, I've been a photographer and a photojournalist, and now I've gone back to school and am now pursuing science. And I think that's part of being an explorer. So yeah, just follow your curiosity.
Marangels, what's your advice?
Yeah. Just to add to what Gabby said, like I would also say, like, you don't really have to know where exactly you want to go. So like myself, I didn't even know I would end up at this stage, but I just followed my passion and my dream. So you should always follow your passion, because that's where your strength is. And for me, being in the conservation field and it's white dominated, male dominated, I didn't really have mentors to help me with my career. So I think if you can get those mentors, it will really be important to have them, and they can guide you along the way and give you the advice you might need, and also help shape up your career. So it will be good to get mentors that can help you in your career.
Yes.
And something more specific to what Gabby and Marangels are saying about following your passion and following your curiosity is, I learned a phrase that I love, which is, I don't know much about that, but I am interested and willing to learn. And that is exactly the phrasing that I used when I spoke with the person who became my first astronomy research advisor. I didn't know that I was interested in astronomy until I tried it. And that was what I said. I was asked if I had any prior experience, and I said no, but I was willing to learn new skills and to learn new things because I had the interest to do so. And so I think that that was important for me to say and to internalize, because it made me realize that I didn't need to like put all these barriers up myself and block myself from opportunities.
Yeah, that's great advice. So I think, I think this is coming out in our answers, so we don't have to spend too much time on this question, but, Claire and I obviously think that this book is important, or we wouldn't have spent 3.5 years working on it. But I'm curious.
But to be fair, the pandemic paused it.
That is true. That is true.
Writing for 3.5.
That's absolutely true. But we, so I'm curious, if you think that books like this are important, why do you, Munaza and Marangels think books like this are important, or what value can they have for kids? So, Munaza, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think similar to what we said earlier in terms of the idea that a scientist is maybe someone who works alone by themselves. I think that seeing and hearing from scientists who maybe don't look like the traditional picture of what we think a scientist looks like is so important for shattering those misconceptions that a scientist is an old white man with crazy hair who sits in a lab by himself all day. And I think that one of the things in particular for me is that my main goal is to inspire other young women that have identities that overlap with mine to pursue research. When I go to conferences, when I travel to observatories, when I go to work, I am the only person that looks like me in the room, and I want to change that. And I'm hoping that sharing my story and being visible in books like No Boundaries can help to do that.
Great. And thanks so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. And
can I just say one thing about books?
Yeah, please.
We thought a lot of Gabby about our book, and what we wanted out of it. And one of the great things I love is that like children's literature is going in this direction where there are a lot more books like ours, where it's science biographies. There are now like board books, like my kid knew who Jane Goodall was when she was like 2 years old. She didn't know who the President of the United States was, but she knew who Jane Goodall was because we had these books. But I will say that our choice, when you open the pages of our book, most of the names you won't recognize, because the women in our book, we specifically chose not because they won the, Nobel Peace Prize, but because they made a difference in their community and they had a good story to tell and they wanted to tell their story. And I think when it comes to books and children's books, I think we need, I hope our book kind of expands this space of, featuring women, not just kind of these like icons, but kind of more everyday women that can be more relatable, perhaps more on the younger side. We're all under the age of like, 40 years old here on this panel, maybe. And I really think that those stories for kids to show that, because I think it puts a lot of pressure on kids to like become Jane Goodall, but like, I would love if my kid became Miranda Mbiza, like, to make a difference in your community and do important work doesn't always mean, winning a Nobel Prize, and I think that is something we need to highlight to kids too, and show kind of the nuanced stories that these other women have. So, going off of that, so we talked about advice, but, I think as a parent now, I have parents come up to me and say like, okay, I love to read your book. I'd love to buy your book for my kid, but like, after my kid is inspired by your book, like, what else can I do? And so like, what is some advice you have for parents who want to foster young girls or boys who are really interested about science and exploration? Renasa, do you have any thoughts?
So for parents specifically, I would say let your kids follow their curiosity and encourage that curiosity. I think I was very annoying as a child. I was always asking my parents why and how. But I think that my interest in physics and my ultimate decision to do research really goes back to that curiosity. I'm really just asking that question, why and how, every day. And my parents, as much as it annoyed them, they always entertained the questions and engaged with them. And I think that was very important for fostering this curiosity in me. And I think that other parents could do the same if their kids were interested in STEM.
Marie Angels, what about you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think also just giving them the resources that they need to learn more and to know more about that career that they want to follow, like books or documentary, and also maybe just connecting them to people that can inspire them, like the women in this book. Maybe if they can get in touch and get some advice, and also just looking around to see if there are like some clubs that they can join, or some sort of like a community that they can be a part of that can also like mentor them and inspire them and motivate them. That would also really help.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree with you, Marangels. And I would just add that, like, I think the more you can give your kids experiences too, where you don't just read about it, but like you go up and look at the night sky, you go out to a star party if you can, and help them kind of understand what it would be like potentially to do that type of work. There's so many opportunities these days for, participating in a dig, a paleontological, expedition, or going to a museum and getting to look through a microscope. And the more that we can actually give kids those direct experiences, I think the more they can, get excited about seeing themselves as a scientist in the future.
And I think my advice, I have two pieces of advice. One is books like this obviously are really key. If you have an opportunity to bring your child to like a lecture, if you live near a university or a city and there's like a female scientist coming through town, like bring them, even if you think it's like a lecture for adults. I think one of the things that I find really compelling is that, like, when I meet scientists, they have like personalities and they're like funny and quirky and empathetic. And that can really bust stereotypes of like what a scientist is. And I think nothing really beats like meeting a scientist in person or just seeing them on stage, in addition to books. And I think like just like giving your kid opportunities if you can when they're interested, and like letting them lead. I think my mom's probably watching, so she might kill me if I tell the story. But very quickly, my mom sent me to sailing camp because I think she wanted me to learn to sail. And I think I kind of want to learn to sail, but they had like a scuba diving certification you could get at sailing camp. And I secretly got that. So I came back from sailing camp and I could not sail, but I became like certified in scuba diving. And that became like a career for a decade. And so, just allowing your kids to kind of take the lead, guide them, but take the lead, I think is really useful too. Sorry, Mom. I'm really thanks for sending me sailing.
I think I'd like to also just ask everyone, because we've talked about advice, we've talked about some themes, and I know we have a Q&A coming up, but what is one of the most exciting moments or exciting kind of discoveries or aha moments that you've had in your career as a scientist? Could you maybe kick us off, Munaza?
I want to mention a moment that was not an aha moment for figuring out something in research, but more figuring out like what I wanted to do, which was my first observing run at a national observatory. So that is a trip to a telescope at a national facility to take data for my research. And I'm from New York City, and I had never been to a desert on top of a mountain, which is where observatories are typically located, because those locations are good for taking observations. And I remember on my first night of observations, I went outside while we had some downtime, and I just looked up at the night sky. And it was the first time that I had ever seen a night sky like purely dark and illuminated by hundreds of thousands of stars. And that was the moment that I knew that I wanted to be an astronomer. Like, it clicked for me exactly how inspiring this could be.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, there is something about that, isn't there? Yeah.
I feel like I had the same experience when I was like underwater for the first time. Like, I was 16 years old and like underwater, breathing underwater and like looking at corals like face to face and just being like, I want to do this. There's something that just kind of changes in you. And if you're blessed to have those aha moments, that lead you, to even more. Yeah, exactly what you're talking about.
What about you, Marangels?
Yeah, I think I had the same experience, like the first time I went to the bush when I was doing my master's degree. It was like my first exposure to conservation and being in nature and seeing wildlife for the first time. That was also like my aha moment, because I knew then and I decided that I wanted to follow conservation as a career. But I think along the way as well, like I had all those aha moments, especially I remember the first time I went to work in the communities and just seeing young people and young girls like looking at me in my khakis and just wondering what I was doing, and they being curious and asking me about my career, and just seeing their faces brighten up, and some of them saying they want to do the same. And it just made me realize that the impact that I can have in inspiring the young generation. So that really also helped me in my career, in terms of being an inspiration to people around me.
Yeah, and you're such an inspiration, I know, to so many,
having been in those
young
communities with you.
conservationists.
Yeah, it's like you're like the Pied Piper. They follow you all around. It's so wonderful.
Yeah, I think these are all such great stories, and I think for me the one that came to mind, and then we'll go to the questions and in the chat, is being on a radio tower that was about 180 feet tall in the middle of the Amazon rainforest in Peru when I was funded on a National Geographic Explorer grant, my first grant, when I was probably 21 or 22, and getting up there before dawn and watching the rainforest come to life, and hearing the macaws and hearing the howler monkeys, and just kind of feeling this sense of wonder, and knowing that I wanted to protect and help do everything I can to help ensure that other people would be able to feel that sense of wonder in the future. And yeah, I think so much for me, it comes from nature. So that's why I do conservation. So I guess we have some great questions in the chat. Are
you ready for me? You ready?
Yeah, Chelsea, do you want to help us? She's
happy to. Okay, let's see what we have here. We might still have time at the end for questions, so if you have one, add it to the Q&A. Okay, Jean-Paul Justin Oman. In the context of the current discussion, what would the difference be between an explorer and a scientist degree career? I am thinking of folks in the International Explorers Society, mostly men in parentheses, rather than the academy. And then he asked a follow-up question, do women need the degree for credibility?
Yeah. I think he's talking about the Explorers Club, and Gabby actually is a member of the Explorers Club, so you can actually switch to this, Gabby, I think.
Yeah, I think for me that the difference between an explorer and we wanted to use the term explorer rather than just scientist because it's broader, right? It captures a lot of different aspects of exploring our world. And I think it also lets kids know that they don't, once again, have to have that formal degree in order to contribute to knowledge of our world. And so for me, an explorer is someone who pursues curiosity. And maybe there was a great quote, and I can't remember exactly the phrase, but it was from another National Geographic explorer. And she said something to the effect of, it's exploration with a mission, right? Like that's what it means to be an explorer. It's exploring the world with a mission, trying to make a difference, trying to make an impact. And so I think that's something that I would say. And I think I'll open it up to the other women for this question about, do women need the degree for credibility?
I think it really depends on what you want to do. I think there's other ways to get credibility, whether it is like aligning yourself with the institution or just like doing really, really good work, having good mentors. So no, like as someone who's like taught at the university level for a long time, it really depends on what you need to do. You don't necessarily need a degree to be like a mountaineer or a, photographer or an expedition leader. In fact, like there's a lot of people who, I think there was like a survey of like people, kids with ADHD who grew up and like what career path they chose. A lot of them became like photographers because like being in the field, like they didn't do a degree, but like being in the field, like where the camera was just like really amenable to like the way their brain worked, and like being in like a classroom isn't. So I feel that, those people who are out in the field, taking really, really remarkable images who don't have science degrees, but they're taking these remarkable images of the natural world. I think, that's just as important. So yeah, you don't need the degree, but it depends on what you want to do. Sometimes you do, but you don't necessarily. Yeah. There's actually a question I really love. Do you mind if we go to a particular question I see here?
Of course.
So someone asked, how did the experience of writing the book change you? And how did participating in the book change you? And I just really like this question. And yeah, maybe Miranda's, you can talk about being in the film that we did. But I think for me, writing the book, I think in science, there are passive advocates and there's active advocates. And I feel like sometimes you kind of need permission to be an active advocate. And so for me, writing this book gave me the insights that I needed to be a better advocate for women in science. Someone asked me okay, what's your view on women in science? I say, well, I interviewed 25 women from across the world. I mean, we interviewed more than that in trying to select women, but we interviewed dozens and dozens of women from across the world, here are these common themes. And, I've gone to the, in order to write the book, we went to the research, and then in editing it, we, understood what kids will relate with. And so I think it's more about almost becoming an expert. And so it changed me and feeling I had the permission to be an active advocate, because I kind of gained this knowledge and experience that I otherwise don't have. And I encourage everyone to not necessarily write a book, you can if you'd like, but find opportunities to, do an experience that changes you to become an advocate. So anyways, yeah, do you want to answer the question?
Yeah, I think for me, it made me even more of an optimist, and it gave me a lot of hope, especially over the last few years. I mean, just to be able to hear these stories and to learn about the efforts of all of these different women, the challenges they've faced and overcome, and the ways that they're contributing to help their communities or to help their mentees or to help, contribute to knowledge of our planet. I think, yeah, it's been a real source of joy and light in, the middle of the last few years. What about you, Angels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we made a short documentary about Mirangels for National Geographic that you can see. But so that's been out longer. So how did being in that documentary change you?
Yeah, I think it gave me time and an opportunity to reflect on my own journey and the challenges that I have faced and everything that I have faced along the way, and really made me think of how I can make things better for others that are coming after me. So now I'm doing everything that I can to have more women in conservation, and also to support the women that are in conservation in my country and beyond. So I think that really made me see myself as somebody who can really make a difference. And also just the feedback from the documentary itself, many people would say, I've been inspired by your story. I want to do better. Even the interactions that they have with women, like the men with women around them, they start to realize the challenges that women have. So it was a really wonderful experience for me, and it changed my life forever, I think.
Will you remind people of the name of the documentary in case they want to check it out?
Sure, it's called Outnumbered in Africa, and I can try to put a link in the chat as well.
If you Google Mirangels Mbiza's name and National Geographic, it should pop up. I think they've retitled it in the actual YouTube video. But you should be able to find it with her name, which you can see right here, Mirangels Mbiza and National Geographic on YouTube, and it'll come up. Yeah. And Muna, so what about you? You've been so open. You tell your story with such an open heart, and that's what I think is just really special about you.
Yeah, I agree with Mirangels that the experience has really helped me to reflect on my journey thus far, and to think more forward facing, what I want to do and what change I want to affect in the future. And a more kind of novel experience that has also come out of this is that I've had friends who were in bookstores looking for books for their children send me pictures of the book and say, "Is this you?" That's always a fun and exciting thing that when it happens.
Okay, should we move on to a couple
Yeah,
more?
go ahead.
Okay, I'm a science journalist. I would be interested in learning more about some of the specific discoveries and contributions to their fields made by our two lovely participants in the book. Or Angel,
Marshall,
do you
do you
wanna go?
want to start?
Yes, so during my PhD, I was looking at lion ecology and behavior, and I was looking at how the social dynamics within prides, like their relationships, so like social networks function in terms of the effect of the impact that prey availability has on those relationships. So I found that prey availability has an effect on who interacts with who and how strong that relationship is. So I was basically looking at like social networks, so like the Facebook of lions and how that is impacted by the resources around them. Yeah.
Fascinating. Manasa?
So my work focuses on studying the atmospheres of exoplanets or planets outside of the solar system. And I do this using data from telescopes in space, like the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Space Telescope soon, once the data comes in. It recently launched on Christmas morning, and also with large ground-based telescopes. And some of my PhD work involved looking really carefully and in detail at the atmospheres of specific planets. And one exciting result from my PhD work was that one particular planet, it's called a hot Jupiter. So it's similar in terms to our own solar system's Jupiter, but it's really close in to its host star. So that about a year on this planet is only a few days long. And I discovered that this planet has no clouds in its observable atmosphere, which is rare but interesting.
Wonderful. Wow, fascinating. Okay, so we've got about 3 minutes. Let's see if we can do a couple more. What surprised you most in the process, I'm assuming, of writing the book or doing the interviews, the research? It's just, I think that's open to a lot of interpretation.
Well, I will say quickly that, I think I reluctantly went into the idea of writing a children's book, not because I didn't want to, but it was more of just I haven't really focused on making a point to adults of that they had been overlooking women. And when it came to actually writing for children, it was something I'd never done before. I worked with essentially education specialists, people who do this for a living. So we kind of wrote the profile a little bit, and then we worked with editors and specialists to kind of write for the level of middle school. And I wanted to make it really serious because I thought it was a really serious topic. And people kept, and the editors and Gabby kept on adding exclamation points and funny little facts. And I was like, no, this is a serious topic. But then I just really realized to really, I have a child, and she asked me really serious questions about death and poverty. And then she's like, oh, did you know I had a vanilla cupcake today? And so she switches between fun and the serious really quickly. And I think the process of writing a children's book, having really, written science for an adult audience, was really eye-opening for me. And I really kind of came around. I still have removed exclamation points from Gabby's writing when we write something together, but it really came around to this idea of even serious topics need to be fun. They need to be fun for kids. We have some really serious themes in the book for sure, but we really interspiced it with things that kids can just find fun, which is the point of childhood, basically. So, yeah. Anyways, Gabby, what would you find surprising?
I don't know that it really surprised me, but it might surprise others, is that, I I think it was interesting to me how so many of the women were so honest and open about the challenges and struggles that they'd had, and that they did have these challenges, you know, and the challenges vary, right? It could be like having imposter syndrome and feeling like, you know, you don't belong in science, or it could be that they didn't have opportunities in the place where they grew up to get involved in science. But I think that it's so important that they talked about those and talked about them openly, because when you just see our bios that are like 5 sentences long, they just highlight our successes and they look intimidating sometimes. And I think for me, it's really important. And I hope it also surprises kids that, like, you know, people who look really, really, really successful and are really successful in a short bio have gotten rejected and have gone through failures and have not gotten into the school they wanted to get into. And I think that's just such an important lesson. And so that was an important surprise for me while writing the book.
Well, I'm sad to say the hour has flown by. I wish we had more time. There are a couple more questions in there that I thought were good. I want to thank you all so much for your time. Angel, it's like 2:00 there now.
I want to thank Morangels for joining us at 2 a.m. and Munasa, who's working really hard, in her own research, taking the time. Thank you for all of the time you've given us and your insights. Thank you to both of you. And to Politics and Prose for hosting us. You're my hometown bookstore in Washington, D.C., so thank you for having us.
Oh, our pleasure. It's been our pleasure. Thank you all for being here. Thank everybody out in our Zoom audience for joining us. Your patronage is what allows us to host events like this. As a gentle reminder, I just put the book link to purchase, No Boundaries. It'll take you directly to the Politics and Prose website, where after purchasing the book, I hope you'll visit our events page. We'd love to see you at another event soon. In the meantime, stay well and stay well read. Thanks, everybody.